Audio Jungle.
For today's headline, specific cognitive or academic difficulties. What are the learning disabilities that involves difficulties in specific cognitive and attention deficit, hyperactive and impulsive behavior, and lastly, the speech and communication. Physical disabilities and health impairment. No, the physical disability impairs and limits their physical functioning. And what are the causes of the physical disability? Sensory impairment. To know what is sensory impairment and what are the difficulties gives it to a person in everyday life. Giftedness. What are the ways of the Philippine Centers for Gifted Education to improve their talents? Differentiated instructions. What would be the approach of the teachers in children's learning, and what are the elements of instructions that teacher can use to meet the need of the students?
Good afternoon. Specific cognitive or academic difficulties has three ways. First is the learning disabilities. Second is the attention deficit hyperactivity disorder or the ADHD. Lastly, the speech and communication disorder. So I have here some video or a short video clips about the specific cognitive and academic difficulties.
Genius and intellectual disability are really not fair because IQ is not the same thing as creativity. In fact, you can have disability, cognitive or intellectual disability, and yet have extreme talents. And this is best seen in savants. Savants are people who do in fact have disability and yet extreme and uncanny talents. Kim Peek is one of the better known examples of a savant. Kim Peek, for instance, could read a page in 8 to 10 seconds. It takes us 3 or 4 minutes to read, and he could remember 98% of it up to years and years later, exactly what was on that page. He also could tell you precisely what day of the week you were born on, if you give him your birthday. He could also tell you what your zip code was if you give him your address. And yet, he couldn't dress himself, and nor could he understand metaphor. So, for instance, the phrase, "get a hold of yourself," didn't really make sense to him. So do you think that Kim Peek's IQ is a valid indicator of how smart he is?
First is the learning disabilities. It involves difficulties in specific cognitive processes. Also, a condition which affects the brain's ability to send and receive the processed information. A child with a learning disabilities may have difficulties in reading, writing, speaking, listening, and understanding mathematical concepts, and with a general comprehension. In learning disabilities, there are 4 different involved in specific cognitive processes. First is the dyspraxia, second is the dyslexia, third is the dyscalculia, and lastly the dysgraphia. So first, dyslexia is a language-based learning disabilities that involves a lack of coordination between sight and sound and makes it harder for a child to read and write. Also, dyslexia is not a disease and it has no cure. Second is the dyscalculia. Dyscalculia is a wide-range difficulties with a math, including weaknesses in understanding the meaning of numbers and difficulty applying mathematical principles to solve problems. Third is the dysgraphia. It is a neurological disorder that generally appears when children are first learning to write. Difficulties with spelling, grammar, and punctuation. The last one is the dyspraxia. It is a developmental coordination disorder or DCD, also known as dyspraxia. It is a condition affecting physical condition or coordination. It causes a child to perform less well than expected in daily activities for their age and appear to more clumsy. Those are the 4 major difficulties in learning activities or learning disorder. Second way in specific cognitive or academic disorder is the attention deficit hyperactivity disorder or the ADHD. It is manifested in either both of these. First is the difficulty in focusing and maintaining attention. It is a disease or decreased ability to focus your thoughts on something. Second is the recurrent hyperactive and impulsive behavior. It is extreme restlessness or talking too much. And the last one is the speech and communication disorder. It refers to problems in communicating in related areas such as oral motor function. This includes the first is the hearing disorders and deafness. Second is the voice problems such as dysphonia or those caused by cleft lip or palate. Third is the speech problem like stuttering. Fourth is the developmental disabilities. And lastly, the autism spectrum disorder. Again, this is Kester Lex Saladores reporting.
The physical disability is a substantial and long-term condition affecting a part of a person's body that impairs and limits their physical functioning, mobility, and stamina. The causes of physical disability is physical abuse by infectious diseases and substances abuse by the child or by the mother during pregnancy that leads to be disabled. On the other hand, health impairments examples includes asthma, and epilepsy. There are staffs from NHS Trust share their ideas or stories on how they care and love the people with disabilities. Let's watch this.
That usually we can easily understand those around us and make ourselves understood. But not everyone finds communicating in this way easy. People with profound and multiple learning disabilities can communicate, but not usually with words. Most will mainly express themselves through non-verbal gestures and through their day-to-day behaviours. Their communication is personal to them and hard to interpret for people who do not know them well. They will have severely limited understanding due to their learning disability and additional disabilities which may include as well as other disabilities like epilepsy, autism and mental ill health. Many people from this group are unable to walk unaided and may have complex healthcare needs which require specialist support such as physiotherapy and gastric feeding.
This is the story of the sea rescue!
My name's Jo and I provide sensory storytelling sessions at the day centre I work at. This allows individuals to play an active part within the stories.
It's a boy! On a lino!
These activities are a great way of detecting how somebody's actually feeling. Today, Hemma doesn't appear to be that happy. We've learnt a little technique of cheering Hemma up when she's not feeling good. And that involves me putting on Hemma's trousers, which Hemma finds absolutely hilarious.
Ashley, yeah, does that make you happy? Yes.
No!
Oh no!
It's taken several years for me to get to know Hemma this closely, and our relationship means that I can interpret how Hemma's feeling.
Thank you.
Consistency means relationships can be formed, and relationships enable people to communicate. In order to help people with PMLD, they need to have access to a wide variety of activities and approaches. This then enables us to understand how they can communicate.
The loss of physical capacity results in the person having a reduced ability or inability to perform body movements such as walking, moving their hands and arms, sitting and standing, as well as controlling their muscles.
Since I was a kid, the burning desire in me was to do what everyone else can do. I love being in the water.
Nicholas James is an Australian Christian evangelist and motivational and keynote speaker with tetra amelia syndrome, a rare disorder characterized by the absence of no arms and legs. Throughout his childhood and adolescence, he struggled not only with the typical challenges of school and adolescence, such as bullying and low self-esteem, but he struggled with extreme depression, loneliness, and anxiety. Dealing with attempted suicide, questioning his purpose in life, and overall daily struggles with having no arms or no legs. Nicholas accredits his victory over those things and his strength and passion for life to his devotion and faith in God. He also credits his family and friends along the way in life with encouragement. It is important to note that defining disability is not about physical condition itself, but how it impacts in their life. I am Hazel Faith Subel reporting.
Sensory impairment is when one of your senses, sight, hearing, smell, touch, taste, and spatial awareness is no longer normal. Example, if you wear glasses, you have a sight impairment. If you find it hard to hear or have a hearing aid, then you have a hearing impairment. Healthy vision in eyes is something we take for granted, but nearly all of us experience poor eye health during our lives. Today, about 1.1 billion around the world are living with vision impairment has not been addressed, and there are hundreds of millions more that need ongoing eye care through their lives. 8 out of 10 people in need of eye care live in low and middle income countries, and many of those with vision loss cannot access the eye health service they need. Vision impairment has a huge economic impact. The estimated annual productivity loss is equivalent to $411 billion US, that's nearly twice the GDP of New Zealand. Poor eye health can impede learning, working, caring for others, reduce overall health and well-being, and can lead to lower life expectancy. These challenges have far-reaching effects on the world's development, and more of us live longer. The problem is not only going to get bigger. Visual impairment is a term experts use to describe any kind of vision loss, whether it's someone who cannot see at all or someone who has partial vision loss. Some people are completely blind, but many others have what's called legal blindness. On the other hand, hearing impairment or hearing loss occurs when you lose part of all of your ability to hear. Other terms that are used to refer to hearing impairment are deaf and hard of hearing. Hearing impairment are classified in terms of the severity and type of hearing impairment. The severity of the hearing impairment is categorized based on the minimum sound that can be heard with your better ear. The higher the decibels or dB, the louder the sound. With mild hearing impairment, the minimum sound that can be heard is between 25 and 40 dB. People of this level cannot hear soft noises and may have trouble following conversations in noisy settings. With moderate hearing impairment, the minimum sound that can be heard is between 40 and 70 dB. People at this level cannot hear soft or moderately loud noises and may have trouble hearing unless they use a hearing aid. With severe hearing impairment, the minimum sound that can be heard is between 70 and 95 dB. People at this level are unable to hear most noises and may rely on a lip reading or sign language, even with the use of a hearing aid. With profound hearing impairment, the minimum sound here is 95 dB and over. People at this level may only hear very loud noises and rely solely on lip reading or sign language. Hearing aids are not effective. Now let's take a look at the types of cause of hearing impairment. Conductive hearing loss is when a hearing impairment is due to problem in the outer ear, middle ear canal, eardrum, or the ossicles, which are the tiny bones in the middle ear. When the sound is not being conducted properly through the ear, conductive hearing loss occurs. Most cases of conductive hearing loss can be corrected medically or surgically. I am Patricia Maisalabao reporting.
Good afternoon. I'm Atina Wahani, your news reporter for this time. The Philippine Center for Gifted Education Incorporation, or the PCGE, a non-profit actively searching for gifted Filipinos and providing ways to improve their talents. Estimated up to 10% of the country's young population, over 50 million, aged 1 to 21 years old, are gifted, but not all of them have been identified. Indeed, parents have a role in nurturing gifted children. In 1761, a 4-year-old Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart began composing his first piano concerto. His father, a composer himself, quickly realized the potential in his child. He quit composing and devoted much of his time to schooling the young Mozart in music. At the age of 8, Mozart wrote his first symphony, then went on to compose several opera pieces by the time he was 16.
From the age of 6, Mozart was touted around Europe and forced to perform for various aristocrats, one of which being Queen Marie Antoinette of France. Some of his most recognizable works today include Symphony No. 40, and Eine kleine Nachtmusik, as well as numerous works on the piano such as Piano Sonata No. 16 in C major, and Rondo alla Turca.
Every child is special. Some kids, however, are smarter than others. Still others are the legend of Albert Einstein, Charles Darwin, Leonardo da Vinci, and Isaac Newton, the intellectual elite and great thinkers. Gifted children are born with natural abilities, with above the average of their age. The U.S.-based National Society for Gifted and Talented, or NSGT, described giftedness based on the U.S. Department of Education definition, the characteristic of youth with outstanding talent who perform or show the potential for performing at remarkable high level of accomplishment when compared with others of their age, experience, or environment. For more information of the Philippine Gifted for Education Incorporation or the PCGE, you may visit the links flashed in your screen. That's all. Thank you for listening. Back to you.
Differentiated instruction is an approach whereby the teachers adjust their curriculum and instruction to maximize the learning of all the students. Differentiated instruction is not a single strategy but rather a framework that the teacher can use to implement a variety of strategies, many of which are the evidence-based. These evidence-based strategies includes the employing of effective classroom management procedures, grouping students for instruction, assessing readiness, and teaching to the student's zone of proximal development. Differentiated instruction is not a one-size-fits-all approach, but instead should be shaped to meet the needs of the students. This doesn't mean that the teacher individually tailor instruction, rather they differentiate instructions for groups of students. According to Carol Ann Tomlinson, there are 3 instructional elements that the teacher can use to meet the needs of the learners.
Carol Tomlinson talks about the ability to differentiate in 3 areas: content, process, and product.
Differentiated content is related to what the students learn. But again, you want it to be the same standard. Some students might reach functions on a standard while others are still focusing on the basics of a standard. The content delivery can be varied based on student interest. For example, some students read stories based on music, while others read stories based on sports. Moving on to differentiation by process. So for example, you can differentiate an activity by creating activity tables. Next, you can differentiate students through various groupings. You may differentiate students based on their levels of readiness, or differentiate the learning process through various number of learning styles. Have some tasks designed for visual students, like creating diagrams, and other tasks for auditory learners. Lastly, you can differentiate the instruction as a product. Some assessment types might be in the best interest of one group of students, but not in the best interest of another group. Offer different types of assessments. Also try to incorporate projects and product assessments to allow for class creativity. Students can come up with their own ideas.
Differentiating instructions involves making changes to one or more of these elements. There are no prescribed way to differentiate instruction. The changes that the teacher makes to each of the classroom elements depends on the needs of his or her students. Also, 3 characteristics of students that the teacher should consider when planning instruction, which is the readiness of the students, the interest, and the learning profile. This is Kian Joy C. Patron reporting.